Everybody knows Georgetown is full of history, but one thing that was recently discovered is that Harriet Tubman played a big role in Georgetown's history, and this house at the corner of King and Highmarket Street played a big role in Harriet Tubman's connection to Georgetown. Now, we recently sat down with Steve Williams, Kent Hermes, and Marilyn Hemingway to talk about that connection and about a marker that's coming very soon to this location to celebrate Harriet Tubman and Georgetown.
Well, first of all, like Ken, I'm a history buff, and as you probably know, I have a book entitled Ebony Effects, 150 Unknown Facts About Blacks in Georgetown. About 10 years ago, I was researching on Bowley, and what is prominent about him, or what is known mostly about him, is that he was one of the Reconstruction heroes that came to Georgetown after the war, and he was involved in an unfortunate scuffle between political rivals, which did not look good for Georgetown. But since then, I've come to understand that he has done so much more. When I say so much more, he was one of the trustees at South Carolina University who literally opened the door for blacks to attend at a time when we could not attend. He was also a probate judge, a very prominent probate judge. And we discovered that he was one of the main publishers or primary publishers of a newspaper called the Georgetown Planet. But here's what was not common knowledge, and I just discovered it maybe a year and a half ago. He was, along with his mother and his younger sister, the absolute first passenger on Harriet Tubman's famed Underground Railroad. And his mother and Harriet Tubman considered themselves sisters, and actually they were aunt and niece, and they concocted a plan for them to be rescued off of the auction block. Very interesting story. So after Bowley, who was a seaman, was able to rescue his family, unbeknownst to the auctioneers, he met Harriet Tubman, and Harriet Tubman took them to Canada. However, understanding how meaningful education was, she decided to keep James Bowley for a few years and educate him. James Bowley and family was the first on her railroad, and as you know, she rescued almost 100 people. Then, after the war, Bowley came to Georgetown roughly 1867, and in 1868, Harriet Tubman got together with her influential friends in Auburn, New York, and had something called Freedom Fairs, where she raised money, book supplies, food, and clothing for the students in Georgetown, specifically to take that for her nephew, who was the commissioner of the schools. He began teaching in the Freedmen Bureau on the Rice Hope Plantation. And within a year, he became commissioner of the schools, well over 60 schools, small schools, but schools. And they needed supply. This is coming out of slavery. So Harriet Tubman took it upon herself to raise money, and it was significant money. And a good friend of mine asked me to contact Kent. What I discovered and what I like about Kent is that Kent had already called the definitive prominent historian on Tubman. Her name is Kate Clifton Larson, and Kent had already written her a letter, this is before I met him, and said that I just purchased this house, and I know that this man has done more than what we see in the history books.
Steve approached me about 8 months ago, I believe.
Yes.
Mid-2018, about working with the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce so he could apply for a marker with the State Department of Archives and History. And you have to have an organization. And I was quite happy to allow the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce be the sponsoring organization for the historical marker. And that allowed Steve to go to the Department of Archives and History and complete the application, which was recently approved for the historical marker, recognizing James Bowley and his contributions to Georgetown, but also the Harriet Tubman connection, which I think reflects the national and international prominence of Georgetown because of its rice culture, but I think something that has been hidden for too long, it's an open secret, is that we have this rice culture, we have these plantations, we have this history of wealth being built on the backs of enslaved Africans and descendants of enslaved Africans. So on a personal, professional level, I am a descendant of enslaved Africans. Steve is also, I'm also a descendant of those who enslaved the Africans. So it all came together. So we were quite happy as a Chamber of Commerce to be the sponsoring organization. And when he spoke to me about it, he was excited, and it made me excited.
And when I got the thing from the State Department, Ken could tell you, I was screaming. I was like, we got it.
And it is something that should be exciting for everyone. It's international. Georgetown has always had a place of prominence because of its history, and this is just one more piece of that puzzle, and we should all be very proud of it.
Yes.
Now show us the house where this marker is going to go up.
Okay.
And so now we are at the home on the corner of King and Highmarket Street where the marker is going to be placed. And we're going to talk to Mr. Hermes now, the owner of the home. Now, once again, tell us about how this all came about, the history and all this stuff.
So I started looking at property to buy in Georgetown after I moved back to South Carolina in 2017. I came across this property and I decided to buy it, but then as I started researching the history on it a little bit, just to see, I knew it was on the state registry and the National Historic Registry at that time, listed as the James A. Boley House. I started doing a little research on that and discovered his connection to Harriet Tubman and some of the work that he had done in Georgetown during the Reconstruction period after the Civil War.
Now show us where the marker is going to go.
The marker should go right up here somewhere close to the walkway from the street. Thinking over in this area here so that we can see it from Highmarket as well as King Street.
Yeah. Now, how surprised were you when you found out, that this house had a lot more history than you thought when you bought it?
Oh, very surprised. Really, when you start thinking about your living, one day when the construction is done, I'll be living in a house that was owned and lived in by a man who not only knew Harriet Tubman, but was a favorite nephew of hers, and lived with her for several years up in Philadelphia.